Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment, for the Maingear Vector Pro. This is a 17.3-inch thin and light gaming laptop that weighs roughly 4.5 pounds without its 230-watt power supply. With it, roughly 5, and it will deliver performance basically like 7 to 8 pound machines would, and it's doing it all at an affordable price for its spec list. So we've got an Intel 11th Gen Core i7-11800H octa-core CPU, complemented by 32 gigs of RAM, which of course is upgradable to 64 gigs, a 1TB Gen 4 Samsung NVMe SSD. There's an additional slot. You can of course upgrade those as well. And then the star of the show, the NVIDIA RTX 3080 with 16 gigs of VRAM and a 165-watt TGP. You heard right. That's what you would traditionally find, again, in desktop replacement machines that weigh 2 to 3 pounds more than this, and at a price point that is generally $1,000 more than the $2,300 US pre-tax, or $2,500, depending on whether you go direct through Micro Center or through Amazon, which will also be Micro Center, to purchase this laptop. Now, I can tell you it's not a perfect machine, but it is one of the best gaming machines and arguably workstations as well, depending on how you want to look at it, here in 2021. So let's start going through everything. The display, 17.3 inches, 165 hertz refresh rate. It's excellent. It has QHD resolution. It's an IPS panel. It's essentially what you'll find in much of the competition, roughly 400 nits of brightness. It doesn't have content creation, color accuracy, but very good for its gaming class. So we're talking about, yes, 100% sRGB, but a little over 70 when it comes to Adobe RGB. So I like what I see here. It is a matte finish. We have a 720p webcam that supports Windows Hello up at the top, a big upgrade from the previous generation Maingear Element, which had it as a nose cam. And by the way, for those of you wondering who Maingear is, they are a boutique builder out of New Jersey. I've built machines with them before. Very high-end stuff, very expensive. They will only be providing phone support for this machine, because what they've done is they've partnered with Micro Center. This is not the first time, and this machine is only going to be sold, as far as I know as of right now, by Micro Center, directly and through Amazon. So if you have any sort of warranty issues, you'll be going to Micro Center at a brick and mortar level and they'll be repairing it, or you'll be mailing it in. So if you're wondering about warranty, that's cleaned or cleared up that issue. Let's focus on the build. So this is a Tongfang chassis, Intel reference design. You can get it from other manufacturers like Electronics. There are several builders that use this, and it's one of my favorite, especially here in 2021. It's excellent. Again, really thin, really light, but doesn't skimp on performance at all. As you can see from the Time Spy score there, 12,028. That's with everything maxed out, of course, on power, not on battery. And if you're wondering about battery life, it also does fairly well. When we've got the dedicated GPU, the 3080, turned on, off of the charger, obviously, you're looking at anywhere, I would say, from 2 to 4, maybe a little more hours, depending on what you're doing with the machine. Obviously, if you're gaming or rendering video, that battery life is going to drop off really quickly. If you're just doing productivity work, it will hold up. Now, if you turn the GPU off, which you can do in the included software, now this is not the Maingear software, this is actually Electronic, and I'll explain why, then you're looking at closer to 7 hours, which I think is excellent for a machine with this size display and power-hungry internals. I mean, really next level. And this is something that I purchased thinking that it would replace my Asus G15, even though my G15 is really versatile, really powerful, and wasn't that much less expensive than this. Believe it or not, they weigh almost the same, which is mind-boggling. Now, the reason I installed the Electronics Control Center is because Maingear was more conservative. Their software is identical, but they took away the ability to max out the TGP on the GPU. So essentially it'll look just like this, but it will be Maingear themed, like the background. Also, out of the box, this will be red backlit on the 4-zone RGB keyboard rather than the blue you get from Electronics. And essentially, what happens is that when you jump into performance, they'll have office mode, balance mode, but they won't have beast mode. They'll have turbo mode, and this is part of Electronics making it their own. This is not their machine. In fact, they don't even have this build right now. You can only outfit this with electronics with a Ryzen CPU, which isn't a bad thing, but you will give up, obviously, Thunderbolt connectivity. This does have Thunderbolt 4, which is another thing I really like about it. And in addition to that, at full wattage, the Intel processor does, for the most part, outperform the Ryzen alternative at every turn. Gaming, video editing, all of those things. Even if it's marginal, it's still best it. The Ryzen only has an advantage off power, so running on battery, that's where it will outperform the Intel CPU, for those of you wondering. Now, with that said, when you're inside beast mode, you'll want to go to overclocking. And I believe Maingear disabled the ability to max this thing out because even though the GPU is capable of 165 watts, as you can see right here, I think that they wanted to make sure that the GPU lasts as long as possible. So in an effort to essentially maintain the longevity of the product, I believe that's why they went with a more conservative 130 watt draw than what electronic software permits you to do. And maybe the reason electronic software permits you to do this is because, well, they don't have the 11th gen chips yet. I'm sure they will soon, but right now, again, if you were to max this out, similar build with an AMD chip with electronics, you'll be set back almost $3,200. So this thing is arguably a steal at its price point if you like what you see and you are totally in on the Intel reference design, which I think is excellent. It's subdued, it doesn't pick up fingerprints too easily. The keyboard is good, not great. Certainly better keyboards on the HP Omen line and Lenovo's Legion series laptops. So something to be aware of, but you do get a numerical keypad. The 4-zone RGB is not excellent. I don't really care about that, but for those of you that do, you might be slightly disappointed. The colors aren't perfect, as well as the fact that no per key options exist, to my knowledge, with Maingear or any other manufacturer dealing with this chassis. It's not within its capability. Now, when it comes to the fans, those of you that are wondering how loud they get, I'll show you right now. That's it. This is loud, no question about it. But compared to competing products, I think that that is par for the course when you're talking about high performance gaming laptops. So I don't think it's bad at all. And when it comes to the display, they have tweaks for that as well. Right now I'm in vibrant mode, but clearly if I take it to other modes, you will see it does change all the different levels in order to accommodate what you're trying to do. Now, this is nothing new, it's just something I'm making you aware of, and the Maingear software has all of these exact same elements. Remember, the only difference between the Maingear software and electronic in terms of their control centers is the ability to max out that GPU, which I think you're probably better off not doing. I wouldn't want to steer you in a direction of shortening the lifespan of what otherwise is an incredibly powerful machine. I mean, this is the most power you will get not only at its form factor and its weight class, but at this price point. This essentially is performing like a desktop with a 3070, just about, which is amazing. A desktop 3080 will give you somewhere between 40 and 50% more GPU horsepower over what the mobile 3080 in here is capable of doing. Again, that's with it totally maxed out. So it's pretty amazing, but certainly not perfect. Now, you've heard about battery life, you've heard about the display quality, the keyboard. The touchpad is excellent. Actually, it exceeds my expectations. It's large. I think it's glass. At least that's what it feels like. So I'm impressed with that. And I have no complaints about it whatsoever. You still have the ability with a double tap there on the corner to turn it off and turn it back on. And then the performance mode button right here cycles between office mode, which keeps the fans cranked down, keeps battery life at the max, whether you're in the integrated GPU mode or the discrete GPU mode. And then balanced mode obviously is a balanced combination. And then what would be, forget about beast mode because I'm not doing an ad here for electronics, that would be turbo mode for Maingear, obviously is performance oriented. Power button will put it to sleep, as well as obviously power it on. Hard press will do a hard shutdown. And then we have another light here for when it's charging. For a full charge, a little under 2 hours. Again, I think that's really reasonable considering what this machine is capable of, and I love that the 230 watt brick is as small as it is. It's about half the size of the HP Omen monstrous 330 watt power brick. Now, you will not be able to charge this over its Thunderbolt 4 port. That's something I hope next gen we see. The micro SD card slot leaves a lot to be desired. It's essentially the same one that I have in my G15. You have to flip the card over to insert it, and it will not actually, in doing so, it will not actually go in all the way. So for those of you that are wondering, right there's the micro SD card slot, 2 Type A ports right there on the other side of the machine. And it's really amazing how thin this entire build is, and that the quality is still maintained with the, what I believe is magnesium alloy build. We have another Type A port, and then audio jacks, mic and headphone. I like that they're dedicated, as well as a Kensington lock. And then if I go to the back of the machine, which I will, that is where your output is. So Thunderbolt 4 right there, next to the HDMI, which is an HDMI 2.1. A little bit limited on the video out. I mean, HDMI 2.1 is your only method, because the Thunderbolt 4 connection does give you DisplayPort out, of course, up to 8K 30. But remember, that is not going to leverage the GPU. That is only going to be Thunderbolt display. So that's the integrated, not the discrete NVIDIA GPU out. And then we have Ethernet and, of course, the power pin port for charging. Ventilation all around the Maingear logo, which I think, again, is a nice logo. I think they did a good job. This is really a subdued machine. I mean, granted, the touchpad has some finger marks on it from use, but otherwise, this thing stays really clean and is not a fingerprint magnet. So I like the look. I feel like this can go anywhere. It fits in my backpack's 15-inch compartment because of its form factor, and it certainly doesn't feel heavier than a 15-incher because of its weight class. So what are the downsides? Well, I've already stated pretty much everything you need to know about performance. I didn't talk about the 1 terabyte Samsung Gen 4 drive. There are actually 2 slots, and so you could upgrade that. Of course, I'd love to throw one of these in there, an 8 terabyte Sabrent, but this is not a Gen 4 drive, so this is only good for really additional storage, obviously, mass storage. But you can do that, and in a perfect world, I would throw a 4 terabyte Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus Gen 4 drive in there, plus that 8, have 12 terabytes. That's what I've been demoing in the Omen 17, and that would just be amazing, obviously. Now, these read-write speeds are not best in class. I've gotten better performance in the Omen 17 with pretty much the same Samsung drive for whatever reason. But still, Gen 4 performance pretty much doubles what you got out of Gen 3. Of course, Gen 5 is right around the corner, but I wouldn't be too concerned. The point is, you can put any drives in here you want, upgrade very easily. But this is a machine that right out of the box, the beauty is you will not need to upgrade anything. Now, the RAM, as I covered in the comparison to the Omen 17, is Gold Key. That essentially is house RAM from Micro Center. It's not a benchmarking nightmare, nor is it going to give you best-in-class benching, but it does the job. I don't see a need to replace it, but if, like me, you would want to max this out to 64 gigs, I mean, I have some Crucial RAM that I tested it out. There was no difference. It's really just headroom. So that tells you, yes, you could get a little more performance out of the RAM, but that would really only be for synthetic benchmarking, and I would not recommend it. So, as I was saying, where is it a little bit of a letdown? Because everything so far sounds amazing, right? Well, we know the GPU is great. 4K video editing, fantastic. Gaming, fantastic. You'll be able to max out any title in the native QHD resolution here, but no G-Sync support with this display. If you go with the AMD variant, you will have FreeSync. That is what I have read, so one advantage to the AMD build, even though you lose Thunderbolt. The top of the line build for the AMD configuration on this machine actually has a RAID 0 configuration because they don't have Gen 4 support, so that's the only other way to get as fast as possible when it comes to NVMe Gen 3 SSDs, 64 gigs of RAM, and what else does it have? The same 3080, of course, same specs on the display and everything. It's really just, I believe, the RAID 0 config and the 64 gigs of RAM, and that machine is $2,700. So I don't recommend it, but if you care about the fact that you'll have FreeSync support on the display, that's a good option, obviously. Just something I thought was worth mentioning. Now, you can step down to the 3070 model, $1799. I think that's more value-oriented, even though this is so value-oriented already. But if you want to spend a little bit less, that machine also 32 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte NVMe drive, all the same specs except for, of course, the GPU. I think it's also a really good buy. But for me personally, this is the only build that makes sense, because I was looking for something that was going to blow away my Asus G15 with the 3070 Max-Q and the Ryzen 9 8-core CPU. And this almost does, but doesn't quite. You know, it's definitely a big leap. I mean, just in synthetic benchmarking, you're talking about going from 9,500 to anywhere from 11 to 12,000. So just in synthetic, it's a couple thousand benchmark points. And in video editing and gaming, you can see the difference, because, you know, this thing, as I said, could max out any AAA title, you know, Ultra, QHD, natively, no problem. Now, trying to take it to 4K, some titles are going to be able to play at Ultra. A lot of titles will not, simply because that's a limitation of the 3080 GPU in its mobile variant. But it still will, I think, exceed anyone's expectations. If you're looking to run VR games, you're not going to have a problem. Just remember, the I/O is limited when it comes to video out. It's really going to be one display. I wish they would have, you know, given a display port, a dedicated one like the Omen and, you know, some other gaming machines. But alas, it does not have that. Just like I wish it had a full-size SD card slot rather than an upside-down micro that, you know, again, the card does not all the way insert. Some people will prefer that, some people will not. I like it when the card goes all the way in. But we're really nitpicking here. Speakers are terrible. I haven't mentioned that because that's one of the pitfalls, but I really don't care. I mean, with my Asus G15, I have some really good audio quality, but at the beginning, anyone who followed my coverage knows that the speakers made a nice little farting noise for quite some time, and while they've improved with driver updates, still far from perfect. I don't expect perfect audio out of this, but it would be nice if it was better. It's mediocre, but, you know, kind of like the keyboard, it's one of those things where if you're willing to live with it, you will not be able to match the overall quality and performance that you'll get out of this, again, especially in its form factor. It's just impossible to replicate right now. So I do really like the machine. Battery life is solid, performance is solid, pricing is soft, which is surprising, especially in a market where desktops are still dried up because of supply chain delays. And I don't know how long these things are going to last. Who knows? I feel like they were made a couple months ago and people just don't know. They're flying under the radar, and that's why I'm sharing it here on my channel. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one on YouTube that has actually reviewed this laptop. Not on the planet, but on YouTube. For some of you, that's one and the same. At any rate, the point is, this is a great machine. I can easily recommend it, but let's come to the one thing that I feel is a little bit of a shortcoming for it. And it's not huge. You know, I wish that we had power delivery on the Thunderbolt port, on the, you know, the USB-C port. That would be a game changer. Hopefully Gen 4, or excuse me, the next gen, not Gen 4, brings that. I mean, they made a lot of improvements on this machine from the previous generation, because if you know anything about it, the previous gen, the nose cam wasn't the only problem. I mean, the display just had high refresh. It was full HD, so that was a big bump up. And, you know, build quality is just really, really nice. It doesn't get too hot. For those of you worried about thermals, it's a pretty positive story overall, because as hot as it gets, which is mostly in this area, as you'd imagine, nothing is really getting throttled. And I think that's part of the reason that Maingear wanted to actually notch this thing down, because they don't want anybody to shorten its lifespan. So really easy to open the bottom of the chassis. You know, it's just a matter of removing the Phillips screws. Really no pry points at all. That's why I so easily just took it off. It's another thing to really like. Now, as for the interior of the machine, it's kind of a mixed bag. And I'm going to show you that right now if you didn't see the comparison. Also, the heatsink / thermal pads for the NVMe drives right there on the interior of the back cover or bottom cover. It's, you know, it's not a big problem, but something I wanted to point out. You don't see a lot of manufacturers actually do that these days. So what do I think is a little bit of a mixed bag in here? Well, first of all, it's just, it appears to be a little bit of a rush job, you know, and I say that because there's a lot of taping down and a lot of folded ribbon cables. And I mentioned this in the comparison. I don't think that means anything is wrong with this, but I've had multiple questions about, do I think that equates to, you know, limited lifespan? Now, I can't attest to that. I have no way of saying so. It could have absolutely no impact, or it could be material. I can't really say, but I will say that when I look at other machines in this class that are over $2,000, that are aimed at being high-end gaming machines, they just don't look like this. So again, for some of you, the tape may be a non-issue. It's not even really an issue for me, but it's still something I have to point out. So we've got a piece of tape here, 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 tape under the NVMe slots. That also is a little bit concerning to me. I'm not in love with the fact that the two bays for the NVMe Gen 4 drives are literally kissing. I don't have one in there right now, but it's easy to imagine that if this were in there, you get the picture. And the amount of heat they'll potentially put off, I'm not in love with it. You know, the Omen 17 with the two copper heat sinks, I think is really nice. And most manufacturers are not going that route, and they will not. Most do not even put heat sinks in there. They often do what was done here with attaching something to the bottom lid. That's exactly what Asus did with my G15, but they didn't give us a real heatsink. They just put a thermal pad on it, which was probably on the drive, but it got glued to the bottom. Anyway, so that's just something to be aware of. And I'm sure there's more tape that I missed because it's all over the place. There's also a lot of dirt in there, it appears. It's a little bit dirty in there. So we got this cavity that in the electronic builds is generally used. The ribbon cable for the card reader here is folded. The ribbon cable here for the USB Type A port is folded. Now, that's not going to do anything to performance, but I do wonder about the way it's protruding under the NVMe slots. That will that end up posing a problem that, you know, at least I haven't experienced yet? It's possible. I'm not trying to create, you know, nonsense rumors here. It's just these are obvious observations looking at the interior of the machine. So just things to be aware of. Again, it's a really nice laptop, and I can actually call this a laptop. Most machines in this class, you've got to call notebooks. But because this thing is so thin and light, it is a laptop. And granted, I wouldn't want to game or render video on it on my lap. You could do everything else on it. The fans do remain quiet, as you may have noticed, which is really nice. You know, in the first week, I thought I may have heard some coil whine, but thankfully, it wasn't coil whine. At least I don't think so. So overall, I think this is easy to recommend. I do think that other machines have better internal build quality and engineering at play. So if that matters to you, just like the keyboard, then obviously look elsewhere. But if you really don't care about what things look like on the interior of the machine, then I see no reason not to get the Maingear Vector Pro. Again, the 3070 build is the more affordable option at $1,800. They also have a line of 15.5-inch laptops. I'm not going to be covering the smaller Vector Pros, but those are really appealing too, but they're very close in price to this, and I don't know why on earth you would take a full HD 240 Hz panel over a 17.3-inch QHD 165 Hz panel. I just think that's a big mistake, especially when this is ideal for the 3080. Again, you'll max everything out. Cyberpunk on here was gorgeous, as was every game that I ran. I mean, it was just excellent to use. And then if you want to do content creation on here, even though the display is not perfectly color accurate, it still will get the job done. And having an SD card reader, granted a micro, even if it's got to be flipped upside down and it protrudes, it's still you know, a blessing compared to, as much as I like the Legion series laptops, no card readers, which I feel like a missed opportunity for Lenovo. Of course, the HP Omen 17 does have a full-size card reader that is twice as fast, and the card goes all the way in, but that machine is over 2 pounds heavier, and if you configure it like this, it will be almost $1,000 more. Now, if you're talking about the 3070 build, that's a little bit more on par. That, to me, is it's a tighter competition between the Maingear and the Omen, but that's only if you're going with the 3070, and both of those get max TGP, so that's something that you should really consider. You know, if this form factor appeals to you more and you don't care about the inside, I would say go with the Maingear every time. But then you do have to remember that warranty process, because not everyone is going to get a perfect machine. And if you do not, or if something goes in the first year inside the warranty, I can't tell you what that Micro Center experience will be like. Micro Center is totally legit, that I can say, but I don't know what the customer service experience, you know, and getting it repaired is going to be like. Now, if you live near a store, like I did once upon a time for most of my life before I moved, then I imagine you're going to have pretty good turnaround time. It's going to be whatever the store's internal queue in their repair area is. And so that will be good. But if you don't, you know, then your guess is as good as mine. Again, this is just Maingear branding. They will support it over the phone, but Maingear, I'm not sure, is ever going to actually sell this direct. So, food for thought. It's an excellent laptop. I can easily recommend it. Again, if you want a better keyboard, if you want better I/O, you're going to have to look at something else, but it's going to be at the expense, literal expense of some more money, likely, as well as definitely weight. So it's really a matter of what's most important to you, but I can easily recommend the Maingear Vector Pro. Excellent laptop, excellent price, and the only reason I am not keeping this machine and dumping my Asus G15 with the 3070 Max Q is because, again, it outperforms it as expected, but it doesn't blow it away. And that's because the G15, it had all new hardware in February, and that was a great advantage, and that's why it still sells for retail. I'm sure it'll go on sale over the holiday here, but there's a reason it's able to hold that value, and it's because it's still excellent. The display, battery life, CPU, GPU performance. Now, if this were, 50% faster than the 3070 Max Q, I'd likely jump on it. I would keep it because at the price, it would be worth it. But to spend fresh money, to make a brand new investment and have to sell the G15 is too much work to get, probably what amounts to about 25% more performance. It's a good jump, but not enough for the hassle it's going to be for me I could just give the G15 to a family member, but there's nobody that really wants it, and all of you are going to start saying, well, I'll take it. Anyway, you get the picture. If it was twice the performance, even 50% more, I'd be all over this thing. But for me, it just doesn't make sense yet. I thought it might be, but it's not. That rounds things out. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Again, great machine. I've said it like 100 times. I'll say it again. Easy to recommend. Just be aware of the warranty process and what it may entail. You might want to take out an extended warranty on this. And remember how close those NVMe drives are. You don't want one of these, which costs essentially half of the laptop, this is a $1,200 drive, to blow out because it's kissing another drive. But that rounds it out. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.